everybody's doing really well today. So I'm here to do a color and chat kind of, but also a reading update. So I tend to do this kind of video every couple of months, at least I did last year. And I know this is a coloring channel, but I also know there's a lot of fellow avid readers on YouTube in general, but also on my channel. So I just enjoy talking about books and kind of, what I've been enjoying, what I haven't. And I always appreciate suggestions and recommendations. And then also if you read any of these books and you wanted to chit chat about it, 100% here for it. I would love to. And while chatting to you today, I'll be coloring in 50 Stylish Mandalas by Camelia Angel Kova. I love this book. I want to finish it this year. I'm on page 24 of this book. I am going in order. I snagged some markers already, and I don't really have a color palette. I just kind of grabbed markers that I thought looked pretty. So we'll see how this turns out. It could be really nice or a complete disaster, but it's fine. I'm probably gonna realistically end up purchasing this book again because I just love the mandalas so much. And I just think they're beautiful. So I have 4 markers that I picked out and 1 gel pen. So that's usually what I tend to go for, or sometimes 5 markers and 1 gel pen, depending on my mood and, if I have a color palette that I actually found online, then maybe I'll have more markers. But I think today 4 with 1 gel pen is just fine. But so my goal for the year of 2022 originally was to read 60 books. So that was the goal I originally set for myself. I'm pretty sure I even talked about it in one of my videos where I was like, yeah, 60 books sounds great. But I did end up changing it to 50 books later on, just because realistically 60 books would probably not happen. And I don't want to stress myself out. Reading is something that I do for fun. And this year is going to be a busy one, just, kind of being realistic with myself. I am starting to write my master's thesis. I'm also working. I am also potentially moving this year. So it's just a lot happening, and I don't want to stress myself out and kind of feel like I'm somehow failing. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but I just wanted to be realistic, basically. So I want to read 50 books this year. Last year I read 60, so I think 50 is possible. But also, like midway through 2021, I started reading more fantasy books. Fantasy wasn't really a genre that I knew too much about or had read too much of. But then I just kind of started dabbling in it and I started falling in love with it. But if you know anything about fantasy books, is that they tend to be pretty thick. So that obviously comes into play because one fantasy book can be the size of like 2 literary novels. But anyways, the first book I read this year is called Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch. And it's by Rivka Galchen, I think is how you pronounce the name. Probably isn't. But the book was quite short. I ended up just getting it from my library on my Kindle. And it's kind of told in snippets and from the point of view of this woman that is accused of being a witch. And you kind of follow her trial, kind of how we got there, the aftermath. You also see how it impacts her children and everything like that. And it was a very quick read. I definitely remember that. I gave it 3 out of 5. I thought it was just fine. I didn't love it. It takes place in 1618 in Germany. And the plague is spreading. The 30 Years' War has started. So there's a lot of other things that are happening as well. So overall, it has a rating of 3.45 on Goodreads. So I guess my rating of 3 is pretty close to what the average person is feeling about this book. But let me see how many pages it is, because I do remember it not being too long. Let's see. So this book has 275 pages, which I guess is not that short, but for some reason it felt super short to me Maybe it's because right before I read this book, I was reading like really hefty fantasy books. So I guess maybe in comparison, it just felt much shorter. I thought the book was just fine. I had no like strong feelings against it. But yeah, it just wasn't one of my favorites. If you enjoy reading like a historical fiction, or if you're interested in, the witch trials, I could recommend this book. Again, it was just fine. Nothing wrong with it, but it wasn't spectacular either. But it was a quick read, basically. After that, I did finish a really hefty book. It was 590 pages. And I think it was actually the shortest from the series, or maybe it wasn't. But anyways, it's called The Well of Ascension, and it is part of the Mistborn saga. It's book 2, and it's by Brandon Sanderson. So the original books are a trilogy. There are more books set in that world, but from what I've read and heard, they're kind of, occurring after a certain period of time passes after this trilogy. I read the first one last year, absolutely fell in love with it. Oh, this marker is bleeding. Oh my. So absolutely loved the first one. These books are thick, so just so you know what you're signing up for. But it's just so creative. Like, Brandon Sanderson does such an amazing job. I've added, since discovering, his books, again, I'm quite new to fantasy. I've added so many of his other books to my to read list, because I just love the way that he creates universes and worlds and characters. All his books, or the books that I've read by him, all have like banter and wit, and you care for the characters and things like that. So really big fan of his writing. But what happens generally in this series is that you're set in a world where magic exists, but only some people have magical abilities. And your magical abilities depend on metals. So you're able to use metals that you ingest. So for example, if you burn, gold or silver, other things, which I think gold and silver are not, if I'm not mistaken, consumed, or not popularly consumed, you will get certain powers when you burn these metals like inside of you. So that's kind of how this world operates and how you get your magical powers. There is an emperor, or this head power that declares himself God, and you follow a band of, what are they called? Like outlaws that try to kick him off the throne, basically, because he is destroying society. There is a severe class system where there's the upper class that, can have these magical powers, but they also have balls and everything's extravagant. And then there is everybody else. They're basically treated as slaves. You can kill them, nobody's gonna mind, basically. And the caste system is just kind of flaring up. So there's a lot of political things in here, and just drama and warfare, and they're just amazing. I'm sorry if this description's not doing the book justice. I think it's magnificent. So I gave the second book, which is The Well of Ascension, 5 stars out of 5. I also gave the first one 5 stars. Absolutely adore, love the book. So after that, I listened to Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. So I've read, is it Neverwhere? I think is a book by Neil Gaiman. And I basically needed a book that was easy to follow, that I could listen to while I was at the gym. And this came up, and Neil Gaiman did his own research on Norse mythology and put a book together, basically. If you have heard of Neil Gaiman, maybe it was also because of American Gods. I know it's been turned into a show, and he's the author of that as well. And the audiobook that I listened to, he's actually the narrator for. So that was wonderful. And he puts all the Norse myths into more of like a novel in a way. So it seems less like you are getting a lesson and more like you are just reading a collection of short stories about this intertwined character set, basically. So he talks about like Odin and Thor and Loki. And I thought it was really fascinating. And the stories were quite short, you know, the myths, so you're able to digest it really easily. I thought it was a great book for the gym. So if you're looking to maybe have a book playing while you are doing things around the house, or if you're out for a walk, or maybe also for the gym, this would be a good option, because it's not like an ongoing storyline, right? It's an ongoing storyline in the sense that you have the same characters, but it branches off. So it's definitely something you can kind of digest piece by piece. Overall, I gave it 3 out of 5. I thought it was fine. I just was a little bored at some parts, even though I enjoyed the fact that it was like easy to digest. Sometimes I was just kind of done with the story basically and I wanted to move on, but that could very much be, you know, on the original myths and less on Neil Gaiman. But I do also want to mention, like, in my rating, in my head, like 3 stars is not a negative rating. It's just like average. And I know, you know, ratings can be interpreted very differently, but to me, a 3 out of 5 is like, yeah, it was a good book. Wasn't fabulous, but it also wasn't bad. So after I finished the Norse mythology book, I needed something else easily digestible for the gym. And I picked up Calypso by David Sedaris. I have read one of his other books. I think it's called Me Talk Pretty One Day. I read it at my former job's book club, so it's been a couple of years. But I remember thinking it was really funny, and it's short. It's a collection of short stories from his life. And he's just a very interesting character. His family is very interesting, and just the way that he like views certain situations is very comical. So this was a very light read / listen. It made me chuckle, made me smile. It also made me kind of like roll my eyes at some of his reactions to certain things and, you know, family dynamics and things. So I really enjoyed this book, and I'm really glad I was able to pick it up. It's also a super easy breezy read because it's short stories and because they're really entertaining. I flew through this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and it's 273 pages, so definitely not a long read. But you also follow him and his family as they get a house on the Carolina coast, and kind of his interaction with his family. And I mean, even though it's a very lighthearted book, he also does talk about things like suicide, for example. So definitely suicide warning, because one of his sisters commits suicide. So, but basically he talks about his life, right, and the people in it. It's very funny. It's very entertaining, but he does also touch upon serious and potentially gut-wrenching topics, right? So if you're looking for a funny read, I would highly recommend this one. Just again, maybe, you know, look out for some of the trigger warnings that you may be able to find, because there's also like, there's suicide, there's also like surgeries being discussed. So if like medical procedures like turn your stomach maybe, then maybe not this one. But then also with a book like this, the nice thing is that you can still read maybe the rest of the book, right? If one short story is not your cup of tea, you can just move on to the next one. It might be referenced again, like, you know, the event, but they wouldn't go in great detail with it. But yeah, I also would recommend Me Talk Pretty One Day, which has short stories from earlier in his life. So Calypso is about stories later, like chronologically. So both books, lovely. Again, I gave this 4 out of 5, so I thought it was above average. I really liked it. And he also narrates it. So that was a hoot to listen to. And then you can also like look up what the characters actually look like because they're real people. So I did do some Googling to see what he looked like as well as his husband, just so I can kind of put a face to the name and the stories, right? And he also does public speaking events, so you can also find some of the recordings on YouTube and kind of get to hear him speak and just, yeah, get to, guess, I don't want to say know him, but kind of see who he is and what he does. But yeah, very, very interesting. And if you need another really kind of like easy breezy listen, that's a good one. From there, I moved on to Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. It's a retelling of Ariadne's story. And I don't know if it's a retelling, because I mean, the same events happen, but it's more of it put into a novel form as compared to like the original myth. She's the princess of Crete, and she is the older sister of the Minotaur, right? He is like the part human, part horse, I think. So she exists in a world with gods and heroes and like creatures and stuff. So you follow her story from her childhood to her mother giving birth to the Minotaur and kind of seeing her family crumble because she also has a younger sister, kind of seeing the family crumble and then her and her sister getting even closer than they were before. You're also able to see, you know, the effect the whole situation has on the mother. And they do try to, at first, kind of treat the Minotaur as just a normal child. But, you know, it doesn't go well. That's not really a spoiler. So it's really interesting. And then she is able to escape with Theseus, the Prince of Athens, because he comes to vanquish the beast. So it's very interesting. I did find the book to be a little long. I got a little bored towards like the 75% mark. It's 320 pages. But I finished the book. The ending I thought was kind of heartbreaking, but you kind of saw this coming, right? Mythology is not really known for their happy endings most of the time. So really interesting. Something that I kept on thinking to myself while I was reading this is like, oh my God, why? Like to Ariadne, right? Because it's told from her point of view. Because she makes decisions that make you just like roll your eyes and be like, why in the world would you do that? Like literally everybody knows that's a bad plan. Literally everybody. So, but then I kept on having to remind myself that she's actually very young. So in the book, she's like 15 or 16 or something like that. And I have to like think back, like, did I make the most intelligent decisions when I was 15, 16? No. Looking back at the photos of my hairstyles, no. So if you're reading this book, I guess just, again, remind yourself, because you will get annoyed with her, I promise, because I was annoyed for a good percentage of the book, that she's young, right? She's young, she's making stupid choices, which we clearly see. But yeah, I just was kind of rolling my eyes and being like, oh my God, walk away, walk away. But let me tell you, she does not. So that's kind of this book. Aside from being frustrating because the main character is just young and, you know, acts her age basically. Yeah, I just found it a bit frustrating, but it's fine. I still gave it 4 out of 5. I thought it was very beautifully written. And I don't know if you could tell, but I just wanted to kind of learn more about mythology and some of the very known names. So I was very happy with this book. I know there was kind of a big wave of mythological retellings coming out. There's so many other ones, and I might read another one quite soon because I did enjoy the Neil Gaiman book and this one. So then after that, I finished a book that I was actually reading for quite some time, and ginormous, huge, trigger warning on this one. It's called Know My Name by Chanel Miller, and it is, gosh, what is it? Not a biography. What is it called? When you tell your own story. Why am I blanking on the word? So she was known as Emily Doe in Block Turner's sexual assault trial. So her name was never released. But now she decided to come out, and kind of tell her side of the story, tell like what she was going through mentally and physically, what her life was like leading up to the atrocious evening and kind of, the aftermath after. So really beautiful book. She writes it. I can't believe that she's not a seasoned author based on the way that the story is told and, how eloquent she is and just the way she makes you look at certain situations in a way that I wouldn't have looked at them, but being like, oh my gosh, like, yes, like I see what you want me to see, basically. So obviously, sexual assault is at the heart of this book, right? Because she was assaulted by Brock Turner, so she's telling her side. So therefore, ginormous trigger warning. If that's not something that you're comfortable reading about, this book unfortunately is not for you. But I thought it was gut-wrenching and beautiful. I did give it 5 out of 5. I loved it. I mean, I absolutely loved it. Also, with the way that she writes, I feel like if she is to ever come out with like a novel, I would 1000% purchase it, just because I really enjoyed her style of writing. Memoir, that's the word. It's a memoir. I knew it was going to come to me. So if you are somebody that enjoys memoirs, I'm trying to get more into memoirs, and you will see that I read a couple more this year. This is a really good one. Just again, keep in mind that it's not a happy book. You do, of course, see like the glimpses of happiness and of love and support, but still, the main topic or the main cause for this whole memoir is sexual assault. So with that in mind, if you think that you would want to learn more about her and her experience, I couldn't recommend this book more. I thought it was beautiful, stunning, just stunning, loved it. It took me a while to read through just because it was quite heavy, but loved it. Loved every second. Then moving on to the third book in the Brandon Sanderson Mistborn saga. It's called The Hero of Ages, and I gave it 5 out of 5. So all 3 books I had given 5 stars to, because yes, I loved them that much. And just the story continues with Rin, who is our main character, and her, drive to improve and save the final empire, which is the world that she lives in. And it's just so good. I actually bought these books, like a physical copy of them, and they are on my bedside table, and they are hefty. So, but every time I look at them, I just want to read them again. This was a book that when I finished the series, I was like, oh, I can't wait to reread them, right? And I had just finished these 3 books that are like basically 600 pages each, and I couldn't wait to read them again. So love them. Love them, love them, love them. I will continue reading more from this world, but since I read the trilogy and I completed it, I wanted to move on to some other books, because I'm somebody that, if I start a series, I want to be able to finish it. So I think I'm going to wait to read the next books in the series, since I completed the original trilogy, till I am more settled in my new home in the US once I move. So maybe I will start reading them either end of this year or next year. But I can't wait to pick up more of Brandon Sanderson's work, because I can't say enough good things about his stuff. After the Brandon Sanderson book, I picked up a collection of short stories called Today a Woman Went Mad in the Supermarket. And the stories are by Hilma Wolitzer, I think is how you say her name. And it's just a collection of short stories told from a female point of view, from different stages of a woman's life. And I thought they were all very interesting. I flew through the book. It's quite short. It's 200 pages. So definitely not difficult to complete it. But then also because they were just so entertaining. And you get to know the characters quite well. Each short story, though, is from a different perspective, from a different person. But short stories is something that I'm also trying to read a little bit more of, and I think this one was a great pickup. If you enjoy kind of different stages of life, different characters, and really witty, and the little ad on Goodreads says uncannily relevant, fully agree with that. Collection of short stories, would highly recommend this one. And from there, I migrated to a very interesting book. And it was definitely a unique read. I've never read anything like it before. And it's called The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And it's by Stuart Turton. I gave it 5 stars. And it's a little bit on the thicker side. It's 432 pages. And you are dropped into this, I don't want to say world, but you dropped into this countryside mansion. And you're trying to figure out what's happening because your narrator is confused as well. Like, he has no memory of what happened. He has no memory of who he is, how he got there. Like, the man doesn't even know his name. So you were just trying to piece everything together. So he's in this manor and everybody knows who he is, right? So he is supposed to be there and he just has no idea. And slowly you start to find out that actually he is there on purpose to solve the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle, as the title implies. So Evelyn Hardcastle is the daughter of the owner of this manor, big house basically. And you know that at the end of the night she will be murdered. And he is on a mission to find out who did it, because apparently he is trapped in this vicious circle of waking up in this house every single day as a different person until he's able to solve the mystery. If he is not able to solve the mystery within 8 days, 7, 8, I can't remember. If he's not able to solve the mystery within the 7 or 8 days, he will be tossed back to the beginning of the cycle with none of his memories. So everything that he learned in the cycle before will be forgotten. And there are other people also in the cycle doing the same thing as him. He doesn't know who they are, but only one of them can be taken out and saved. So basically it's also a competition between him and 2 other individuals who he has no idea who they are. So it's Agatha Christie-like. There's also the time jumping because, as character A, he might be in the afternoon, but then as character B, he's in the morning. So there's also trying to put all these pieces together to solve the mystery. And then also he is in different, characters throughout the book. And each of them has different strengths. So also when he is, for example, in the body of a detective, that's one of the last characters that he's going to be in the body of, he has more like detective skills, or he looks at the problem in a different way than he did when he was somebody else, for example. So it was so interesting. It was so weird. There was so much jumping. I honestly wish I was able to reread the book and just write the timeline down, because there was just so much happening. But it was so interesting. I couldn't put the book down. I finished it very quickly. And again, I gave it 5 out of 5. So I really, really enjoyed it. This was a recommendation that I saw on BookTube, which, yes, by the way, I also watch. And couldn't 100%, like couldn't agree more with the recommendation. It's so interesting. If you enjoy a mystery, great book for that. Also a little bit of the fantastical aspect of like being trapped in this loop. You also have like a guide that sometimes appears and like helps out the main character or sets him back, and he's kind of the overseer, so he knows more than everybody else and all this whole thing. So very interesting. Would highly recommend. Obviously 5 out of 5. So I don't read mysteries too often anymore. I used to read Agatha Christie quite often. I went through a phase where I absolutely loved her stuff. So it was nice to come back to another mystery. And I think this might be the only mystery I read this year, so far at least. From there, I wanted something more on the light side, just because that book was very concentration heavy to try and follow the timeline. So I figured I would try a middle grade book, which I haven't read middle grade since I was a child. So this was an experiment for me, basically. But a lot of the individuals that I watch on BookTube also read middle grade. I'll be honest, I don't like YA. I don't do well with like angsty teenager thoughts. Just, yeah, nope. But I thought YA, they're less annoying, basically. So I was like, yeah, like I'll give that a shot. So I picked up The Wishing Spell by Chris Colfer. And it's part of a series called The Land of Stories. And what happens is you follow the main characters. There are twins. It's a boy and a girl. And they're, of course, very different. She is very, like, book smart. And he is more adventurous and brave in a way. And they get a book of fairy tales from their grandma. Well, actually, I think it was, the grandma used to read it to their father. And then she read it to them. So it's like a family heirloom, basically. And she gives them this book of, like, illustrated book of stories. And one thing leads to another. And they fall through the book and they end up inside of it in the stories. So in a world where, like, Cinderella exists and Sleeping Beauty and everybody kind of, like, coincides in this universe. And they have to find a way back. So they find out that a way for them to get back is through the wishing spell. So when you have the wishing spell, you're able to make a wish and then it will grant it. So they figured that if they are able to do the wishing spell, they could wish to go home, because all they want is just to go back to their normal lives. And in order to have or participate in the wishing spell, I don't know how you want to say it, you need to collect certain items, and it's told as a riddle, and they have to solve the riddle and then collect these items, and then when all of the items are together, they're able to make their wish. So I thought the premises sounded really interesting, and I was like, yeah, I'll read it. And some parts of it I thought were really cute and endearing. Some parts I thought were just cheesy, and I guess that's just me not being used to middle grade. But I can also see, like, I probably would have loved this book as a kid. It was whimsical, it was interesting, you got to see so many of the beloved characters. It was also funny, but I guess maybe middle grade's just not for me. If there's another middle grade book that you think I would like enjoy, please drop a recommendation down below. I'm always open to recommendations. But this one just wasn't perfect for me. I gave it a 3 out of 5, so it was decent. But some of the things just like wrapped up, for me at least, like too perfect, here's a bow kind of wrap up. But again, it's middle grade, right? So I should have expected that. But yeah, I thought it was just fine. I will not be continuing the series. I don't even know how many books are in it. The first one, wrapped up nicely. I don't feel like I need to read more. So I'm glad I gave it a shot, but I shall not be returning to the series. The next book took me a really long time to finish, in full honesty. And it's called The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. And I read The Night Circus, I think last year. And I liked it. She writes very atmospheric books. So if you love like a super descriptive, super atmospheric literature, she's the author for you. So this book was very cozy because it talked a lot about books and being surrounded by like artifacts and candles and like cats that want to snuggle with you and just like comfy cozy to an extreme. Like when reading this, I just wanted to light candles all over my apartment and sip a cup of tea and just like eat a cookie. So it was very, very atmospheric. However, atmospheric books tend to lose me sometimes. I also want a well-moving plot. So a lot of this book was descriptions of the surrounding and the smells and the textures and everything like that. Also, this marker bleeds awfully. But anyways, so it was very much like you felt like you were there and you felt like you were able to experience everything with the characters. But I was a little bit missing the plot advancement. So it took me a really long time to finish this book because of some certain points I was just kind of getting bored, because even though I found it super comfy cozy, I wanted like more action and more things to happen. But that's just a personal preference, right? This book has fabulous reviews, and I also gave it a 4 out of 5 just because I really enjoyed the atmospheric like feelings and kind of how I was able to place myself in the surroundings and what is happening. But it wasn't a 5 out of 5 just because it was missing more of like a fast moving action. This marker is awful. But anyways, I should probably also tell you what in the world this book is about. So it's about the main character, Zachary, and he lives in Vermont. He's a graduate student at this university. So part of the setting is the university. So that, you know, it kind of really brought me back to my college days in New Hampshire because the campus and like the weather sounds very similar. And then when he remembers when he was a child, he came across this painting of a door on a wall in like an alleyway somewhere. And the door looked super realistic. And he was really tempted to try and open it. Even though he knew it was a painting, it was just so beautiful and so realistic that he wanted to open it. But then he decides against it, goes home, and then the next day it's actually been painted over. So this happens when he's a kid. And now he is, you know, getting his graduate degree in Vermont, and he goes to the library because he's an avid reader, and he goes to like the miscellaneous book section basically that has like no authors or anything, and picks up this random book. And as he's flipping through it, he finds a story that talks about him being at the door. You know, it's a story of what happened to him, how he was considering opening the door and everything like that. So he is obviously shocked because he doesn't know how this book, first of all, got there. Second of all, like who in the world wrote it. There's no author. So he kind of goes basically on a mission to try and find out who could have written this and how they could have known this. Through this, he finds a secret like book prevention, not safety, bookkeeping society, and then he's just kind of dropped into this world. Then he ends up going to what they call the Starless Sea, which is kind of, what is it called? Like underground, like deep underground, like a twisting museum / library. And it's a magical world, and he's trying to find the purpose of this. He tries to find the purpose of him being there. So it's very, very atmospheric, right? Super atmospheric. You're in this library / museum, and yeah, I mean, just I want to curl up in a giant leather chair with a cozy blanket and a cat, basically. So it's very slow moving for me, at least in the pacing, but I loved the atmospheric attention and everything like that. So that's why I give it 4 out of 5. I'm probably not doing the description any justice, but please do give the description a read. Again, it's called The Starless Sea. It just took me a while because I kept on getting lost in the descriptions of basically everything. But if you like an atmospheric read, Erin Morgenstern is great for that, because also The Night Circus was very similar in the sense that it was so crazy atmospheric and kind of everything that is happening, and you feel like you're literally there. So that's a good one for that. Then moving on to a book called A Single Thread by Tracy Chevalier. So I am rediscovering this author. So at one point, I was absolutely obsessed with Tracy Chevalier. I read every book that she had ever published at that point. I think I was still in high school. So I had read every book this woman has ever produced because I just loved her not art style. I loved her writing style, and I loved the topics that she chose to write about. Oh my gosh, I can't speak. So she writes solely historical fiction, and in a lot of her books, what she will do is she will pick like historic artifact. For example, one of probably her most famous book is a girl with a pearl earring, or The Girl with a Pearl Earring. So she will choose a piece of art like that painting and write a backstory to it, like how it happened, who the person is, like how the painting came to be. And it's so interesting. I've never seen that before, and I remember I read that book multiple times. I also read her book that really stands out to me is Virgin Blue. That one is heartbreaking. That one's actually a dual point of view with a historical fiction and like a modern, what's it called? Like a modern timeline as well. So I saw that she had a newer release. I mean, it was from 2019, so it's not super new. But I just haven't really sought out her literature in a while. So I was like, oh yeah, like I'll definitely pick this up. So it takes place in 1932 after the war, and it follows our main character, Violet. And she's considered what they called at the time a surplus woman, in the sense that, you know, so many men perished during the war that there was more women than men. There was a surplus of women, and she was single. So her fiance dies during the war, and so one day she is at church and she sees, like, I don't want to say christening, but like a welcoming of hand embroidered kneeling cushions. And she decides that she wants to join the organization of women that do like make these cushions, because she just needs somebody in her life, right? She basically just needs a purpose, and she wants some sort of friendship and some sort of like human interaction, basically. So the story follows her life from there on. It's not a very long time frame. And I was telling my boyfriend about the book, and he was like, gosh, it sounds dull. So I'm sorry if I'm doing a really bad job at explaining this book, but it's so interesting and it's so relatable. You know, you follow this woman after this like awful event of the war and of losing 3 family members, right? And also the way it affects her mother and of course her brother, who also went to war, by the way. He just survived. So really interesting. If this one doesn't sound like exactly your cup of tea, just check out anything by Tracy Chevalier. I think all of her books are just absolutely spectacular. So I'm gonna check out to see if she has any other books that I haven't read by her, because again, at one point I had read literally every book the woman had ever written. So shockingly, I did give it 5 out of 5. I thought it was wonderful. And then we're on the last 6 books that I've read. I'm very chit-chatty today. But my boyfriend and I decided to read a book together and kind of have a book club between the two of us. So we read Of Mice and Men, which is a very short book by John Steinbeck. And we read it, and then we, talked about it. So you follow these 2 men. They're very different, personality wise, but then also, I don't want to say body wise, but like stature wise. One is like a shorter petite man, and one's like huge, like giant arms, giant hands, like a bull of a human being basically. And they are in California. They work on farms, and they are trying to make a living and just kind of keep on running into roadblocks and all those kind of things. And again, I'm not doing any justice to this book. Of Mice and Men is a classic, and I'm quite surprised I had never read it before. It was heartbreaking because you also meet a lot of the other individuals that work on the farm, and just hearing their stories and the way they're treated, and, you know, just life in general during that time period. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's definitely not an easy read. So interestingly, my boyfriend finished it first because we just checked it out from the library, so we couldn't read it at the same time. But he read it first, and then he like didn't tell me how heartbreaking it was going to be because he was worried that I wouldn't read it then, because he knows I'm like a softie. But I read it all. I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5, which really surprised him because he was like, oh my gosh, I thought you were going to hate it. So it's definitely not a unicorns and rainbows, happy-go-lucky kind of book. But if you want to read about, you know, just the hard times and kind of different, like the way that dreaming and like wanting a goal to work for can affect you as a person, and how when you are just constantly beat down, how even like the smallest glint of a dream can really be a significant like life changer and make a significant impact. So if that sounds interesting, I would recommend this. I do want to say there is animal violence in this book, which I was not a fan of. I almost stopped reading at that point. But if you're able to get through that, you'll probably enjoy the rest of the book. That was a hard part, but it's pretty close to the beginning, and then after that, there's no animal violence, but there's human violence. That's not a spoiler. After that, I again needed kind of an easy book to process while I either cooked or gymmed, walked, whatever it is. I love always having an audiobook going. So I found this book at my library, and it's called Confident Women, Swindlers, Grifters, and Shapeshifters of the Feminine Persuasion by Tori Telfer. And it's short stories kind of, or like short descriptions of real world. So this is nonfiction, like con artists, female con artists all over the world, and kind of what they did, how they did what they did, why they did what they did. So I thought it was super interesting. I flew through this book. Again, I listened to it, but really, really quickly. It was published in 2021, so it's still quite new. I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 because I truly enjoyed it. It was just interesting, and it made me chuckle because sometimes like the gullibility of some people, or, you know, the story that the con artist would tell, and other people would be like, yeah, like that makes sense. And you're like, what? Kind of like with the Ariadne book, you're like, no, it doesn't. But it was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. I am, again, trying to do a little bit more nonfiction, and this was perfect for that. So big fan, would recommend. After that, I read a little bit of a disappointment, and I'm extra disappointed because I actually bought this book. So as you might have noticed, I tend to do a lot of library reading, whether that is ebook or audiobook. But I did actually purchase this one, and it's called Escape into Cottagecore, Embrace Cozy Countryside Comfort in Your Everyday. So cottagecore is kind of like a phenomenon, I guess, that's really sweeping at least YouTube. And it's basically living, like romanticizing countryside England and kind of living in the old ways, but basically just valuing the simple things in life and being more one with nature and kind of appreciating the small things that the world has to offer in a way. So I've watched some like YouTube videos by cottagecore creators, and I was like, you know what? I want to read more about it. So because whenever I'm interested in something, I read about it. That's just the way I digest new topics and new information. So I found this book on Amazon and I gave it a shot. And unfortunately, I gave it 2 out of 5. It just didn't hit the mark for me. I felt like the information that was presented in there, unfortunately, just wasn't new. There was a chapter on like gardening, and I enjoyed that because they listed some of like the medicinal uses that some of the herbs have been known to have, like dandelions, for example, or like mint, aloe, those kind of things. So I found that interesting, and I feel like if I owned like a physical copy of this book, because I did buy the ebook, that is something that I might have like highlighted or somehow, flagged, bookmarked, whatever. But honestly, the rest of the book wasn't that helpful. Also, it had giant like paragraphs and sections of the book on like how to take aesthetic pictures of your food, how to take aesthetic pictures of like your garden, how to take us like it was like a basic, like it was like a guide to taking cottagecore aesthetic pictures for your Instagram page. And that's honestly not what I was looking for. So I just I just skipped those sections because I wasn't interested in reading it. So I actually read this book in one day. I went to Berlin. Gosh, I forget why I was going to Berlin. I think I had to drop off some donations at the Ukrainian refugee shelter. And then by the time I got back to my apartment, which is like, I don't know, 30 minutes one way, maybe 35, and then back. And I finished it because I just skipped so much of it. Like the Instagram chapters, I was not interested in. Also, they had like music recommendation. And I was like, oh, great. Like I love playing, for example, classical music or, like nature sounds, if that makes any sense. And honestly, the first thing, because they were like cottagecore music to like make you feel at one with the world and like nature, the first thing they recommended was Taylor Swift. And don't get me wrong, like I listen to Taylor Swift, but would I say that's the music that immediately comes to my mind when I think of like romantic British countryside? 100% no. So I kind of lost faith in that chapter right after that. So yeah, I was not a big fan of this book. If you are, that's perfectly fine. It just wasn't my cup of tea, and I feel like there's better resources on YouTube, where you can learn more about cottagecore, what it is, what it stands for, and how it originated. So would not recommend this one. It had really pretty pictures in there, but also, and a lot of people commented on this on Goodreads, most of the pictures in the book weren't even like taken by the author or somebody that she like hired. She just took like Shutterstock. Is it called Shutterstock? Anyways, like free, no copyright images online and put them into her book. So, especially based on that, not the biggest fan. There are other cottagecore similar books on Amazon that I might give a shot, but this one is a no-go for me. From there, I moved on to a book that I could have sworn I had read at some point, especially in like high school, but apparently I haven't. And it's called The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. And it's another memoir about this girl's upbringing and her unique family situation and kind of their unique approach to life and kind of her childhood leading up into adulthood and, to like having her own kids and everything like that. So I believe I listened to this, and it's from 2005, so it's definitely not a very old book. And I thought it was quite good. I'm very shocked I didn't read it in high school because I could have sworn it was like either on the mandatory or recommended reading list. All I know is I've seen this book so many times. But I gave it 4 out of 5. I quite enjoyed it. I found, again, some parts of the book frustrating just because of the characters' decision-making and their decision-making process. But, that's not a reflection on the author or the book. It's just, as people, they kind of annoyed me. Some of the individuals, if you listened or read the book, you'll understand. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that, it wrapped up quite nicely. You were able to follow her, like, well into her adulthood, so you're not left wondering, like, what happened to her or anything like that. So, yeah, big fan. Well, 4 out of 5 star fan. And memoir has just kind of been something I'm dabbling more and more in. I'm really enjoying it. I would say it's kind of in a way similar to Educated, which is a memoir I read last year, in the sense that you follow like a female main character. It's told from her point of view, and then she has a quote unquote, I don't know, irregular family lifestyle, and then you follow her from childhood into like adulthood, and you kind of watch how her childhood and her upbringing impacted her life. So I think if you enjoyed The Glass Castle, check out Educated, or if you enjoyed Educated, which I know has fabulous ratings, check out The Glass Castle. Definitely the way that the families live and everything like that is not the same by any means, but it's just a similar trope, I guess I would say. So after that, I read a book that, actually I think I listened to it, but I was just not impressed. It's called The Maid by Nina Prose, or Prose, I'm not fully sure. And I'm really surprised that it has the fabulous ratings that it does, because I was not impressed with this book. So you follow the main character, who is a maid at this like fancy schmancy hotel. And one day she walks into one of the rooms that she's supposed to be cleaning, and the guest is dead on the bed. So then you follow the aftermath of that, and she becomes the main suspect in the murder, and she actually gets she gets arrested, she gets arrested for his murder, as well as like other things. And you try and follow, like, you know, like, did she actually do it? If she didn't, who did it? You know, kind of, yeah, it's just a mystery. So I guess I did read another mystery this year. But what you're not told, and you kind of figuring out on your own, is that the main character is, in my opinion, autistic, right? Nothing wrong with that, but you're just never told. So you're kind of discovering this on your own. And I read the comments on Goodreads, and a lot of people had a problem with this, because for a good portion of the book, you're like, why is she acting the way that she is? And you're kind of just like confused in a way. It also caused some confusion for me. But also, like, the problem that I had with this book is that in some parts, the main character is portrayed as being super naive, super clueless, like, just, you know, basically, like, unless you tell her straight up the sky is blue, she won't notice it. So she's portrayed like this for a good portion of the book. But then towards the end, she all of a sudden becomes this, like, I don't know, mega mind. I'm going to trick you. I knew this all along. I, like, twisted your opinion. Like, so it was just, to me, it made no sense. Like, character development wise, it didn't make sense how somebody that was portrayed, and it's not like she's like been lying. Like, it's not told like, oh, she's been pretending to be naive. Like, the author wants you to believe that she's fully naive, but then also does these like super sneaky, tricky, haha kind of things. So that really kind of like caught me off guard, because character development wise, it did not make sense. But yeah, so you follow the mystery, you follow also some of the court proceedings, which honestly I thought were cheesy, incredibly cheesy. But anyways, so you do solve the mystery. By the way, I'm not going to tell you who did it, but you do solve the mystery at the end. And yeah, I'm just surprised that it had such fabulous reviews, because I wasn't a fan. Again, I gave it 2 out of 5. Honestly, I feel like I should change it to 1 out of 5, because again, it just wasn't fully my cup of tea. Again, this is just my humble opinion. If you liked the book, fabulous. There's many books that I'm sure that other people like that I dislike, and vice versa, and that's just how it works. So that was The Maid. And now we're on to the last book. This has been a long video. And the last book up till now that I read is called Heartburn by Nora Ephron. And what caught me about this book, and I did listen to it, is that it's narrated by why am I blanking on her name? Oh gosh, no. She was in The Devil Wears Prada. The book is narrated by Meryl Streep. I cannot believe I forgot that. So I loved it. I loved her reading it. She added so much to the characters and to everything that's happening. Basically, it follows a writer called Nora. No, sorry, Nora is the author. It follows a woman who does like cooking writing. She writes about food and cuisine. Her name's Rachel, sorry. So you follow Rachel, and she's pregnant, she's married, she already has a little one. I think he's like a year and a half, 2 years. And then she finds out that her husband is cheating on her with somebody that she knows. So her husband is cheating on her while she's pregnant, and he's cheating on her with a family friend that they like recently had over for dinner, basically. So it's everything that follows afterwards. You also get to learn more about how she met her current husband, because she's also been married before and divorced, kind of how that marriage and why that marriage fell apart. So you just follow her through this stage of life and kind of, the questioning that's happening, like, should I stay with him because, they have a second child coming along? Should she leave him because he cheated? And honestly, he also has no regrets about it. So also Rachel is the main character. You just root for her, and I personally really liked her, and I wanted only the absolute best. I thought she was also funny and witty, and I just thought it was so interesting, and would highly recommend it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It was a super quick listen/read. But also, like, Meryl Streep, yes, please. I'm going to try and find if she's narrated more books, because I just really enjoyed hearing her narration. She was also, like, cracking up at certain parts of the book, or you can tell, like, in her voice that she really thought that part was funny, which, to me, like, listening to this audiobook, I felt like a friend was just, like, telling me gossip that they heard. So, really enjoyed it. If you are a Meryl Streep fan, or you enjoy kind of, quick parts of a life, kind of stories, this is a good one. It's also not very long. It's 179 pages. So also, I didn't know that it was published in 1996. Also, I thought it was funny because, again, the main character is pregnant, right? But they talk about her, like, drinking and smoking. And it kept catching me off guard, but then I realized, like, oh, this is an older book, and back then, like, that was less frowned upon / illegal. So really interesting aspect as well. So those are the 18 books that I have read so far. I am currently reading a book and listening to an audiobook as well. So I do have 2 books in progress, as well as some short story collections that I'm kind of reading, a short story here, a short story there. So really enjoying everything so far. My to-read list is huge. If you want to be Goodreads buddies, please do add me. I always love a new Goodreads buddy. Also, again, any recommendations, please list them below. I will also include my Goodreads user ID down below if you want to add me. I would be honored. But yeah, I'm liking how this mandala is coming along. The color palette's pretty mediocre, but that's fine. I'm here for the experience and the enjoyment. And I just love this book. This book can do no wrong. And then maybe once I get the other copy of it, because realistically I will use a completely different color palette for this bad boy. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see everybody in the next one. Bye.